Luke Thomas for SB Nation here in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the media tent just outside the MGM Grand Garden Arena, alongside a man who has 2 titles. He is president of Showtime Sports, and what I want to ask about first, ultimate Twitter troll smasher, Stephen Espinoza. Stephen, there's a lot to get to about this fight, but it's just unavoidable. I have to ask you, on Twitter, it has been, I don't know, how would you describe it? A campaign, a concerted effort? Just sort of trying to lay out the law of the land about what you saw as the facts as this fight was being built up, and not before it was even promoted, and just trying to be arranged. Why Twitter of all mediums to get your message out?
For the same reason, really, that it appeals to everybody else. It's unfiltered, it's direct, it's instantaneous. So sure, I could call up some writers and get a story written, but it's not my voice, and it's not sort of the way I would cast things. So for better or worse, it gets told in my voice. Whether I'm running around chasing windmills or not, I'll leave that for other people to judge.
Do you enjoy it, the act of correcting the record?
I do when it feels like it has an impact. Sometimes there's just so much misinformation that it's sort of like it's just a drop in an ocean. But if I can sort of turn someone's opinion and have someone appreciate really what is truly going on, I think it's important for the boxing fan to understand the true dynamics of the situation.
So we're just days away from the huge fight. Let's sort of talk about your view, the macro view. What's the view now for you? Are you surprised, relieved, excited, bewildered? How would you characterize how you feel given what's happened up to this point?
I think all 4 of those things. I think surprised, excited, bewildered. I think we've constantly been surprised throughout this promotion at how big it has become. We knew the announcement would be big. We didn't know it would have that many media requests for the initial press conference. We didn't know that after the delay, the closed circuit would go as quickly as it did. So at each stage, it has really surpassed our expectations. When we look at the pay-per-view numbers with the operators that do report early, there's no precedent. We're sort of off the charts. If I look at where we are on Tuesday, Wednesday, we're well ahead of where we were on Friday on Mayweather Canelo, or even De La Hoya Mayweather. So, part of that you have to take with a grain of salt, because we've been messaging early ordering to avoid technical problems. So I can't say all of that is additional demand. Some of it may be the same people who were buying on Saturday are now just buying early to be safe. But what we are seeing consistently across the board is, whether it's website traffic or whether it's closed circuit sales, the interest in this thing just continues to snowball. And at this point, really, the sky's the limit. We're in uncharted territories.
How's it been working with HBO on Top Rank? Now, I understand it's sort of like detente and almost like a walled world in between. Like, you do what you do and they do what they do, and nary the twain shall meet. But even at this press conference, you had Bob Arum sort of not so subtly poking jabs at Showtime, and you didn't really respond. But I just mean generally, has it been such that you could say, well, there'll be another occasion we can work with HBO, or this is really only because of this mega fight that you could ever envision a scenario where this sort of the Cold War goes away?
Well, I'm glad you point that out. For once, I did not respond. I didn't take the bait, which I'm very proud of myself.
Did you want to?
Absolutely. It was a pretty long rant, but after a while, I just tuned it off. I took a short nap. At this point, we're in a pretty good rhythm, but I can tell you, it did take an adjustment. A big adjustment, not only because we have different philosophies, different strategies, different ways of doing business in some cases. It's just another layer of decision making. Things that we are used to doing quickly and unilaterally now have to go to sort of a committee of Top Rank and HBO, and vice versa, I imagine, for their side. So it's a much more complex process. There are many more voices in the room. And with a complex promotion, marketing campaign, production plan, a multitude of voices isn't always the best thing to get things done productively and efficiently. We hit our stride, I think a week or 2 ago, and things are working pretty well. But there are areas where we believe that we have different strategies. We believe our way of doing things is better. Sometimes they believe their way is. There are some areas where we're not going to reach agreement, and that's fine. But overall, I think we've been able to incorporate the best elements from both networks, and hopefully, come out with a better production at the end of it.
I'm sure the focus has been what you guys put out, but have you had a chance to review maybe the HBO product at last or some of the things they've done? And if so, do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, we have, and there have been a lot of conversations, internally, with HBO and on our side. Again, it's a different approach. I mean, theirs is sort of a historic approach. It's not a really a current documentary access type series. It's a look back at what the last 5 years have been. It doesn't say, doesn't really revisit what's going on now in these last few weeks. Our show, which is premiering tonight, Wednesday night, we'll have, some action from today, from the press conference, from things that are happening this afternoon while making the show tonight. I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's just a different approach. Ours is a sort of a current view of what's happening in the promotion and with an eye toward, more Floyd. And theirs is a look back at the last 5 years. I think in this case, the two complement each other. And I think, there's no reason why fans can't enjoy them both.
Your priority now is obviously taking care of this fight, and Floyd has one more in his contract, which he says he intends to uphold in September. But you have to, in some part of your brain, be thinking about a post-Floyd Showtime. Do you have a specific plan for that? I don't mean just what we're going to keep doing, but this is a new paradigm shift. What is the strategy after Floyd decides he's going to hang him up for Showtime?
Well, I think it's a continuation of the strategy that we started set in place a couple years ago when we first started with Floyd. And one was they're obviously going to make him the centerpiece of our boxing programming, but it would be short-sighted not to continue to plan for life after Floyd, whether that's 6 fights or 8 fights or whatever it is. And so now, fast forward 2 years, and I think we've set that plan in motion pretty well. And we still have obviously Floyd, and he's still the pound for pound best, but we have a core group, a really deep pool of young talent. Most of the guys in their early to mid 20s who are either world champions, about to become world champions, or within the next year or two could be title. And that goes from everyone from Deontay Wilder and Danny Garcia to a Keith Thurman to the younger guys like Errol Spence, the Charlos, Julian Williams. So I think when I look at how we're positioned for the future, I think we've got the deepest class of young talent in the divisions that are most popular, and they're all young and articulate and very personable. So I think that's really the key, is sort of the depth of the class. I don't know which one is really going to break out. A little bit of that is luck along the way, but I know at least 1 or 2 of them will. Deontay may be the guy. He's the heavyweight champion of the world. He might be the first one to break out, especially if he's pursuing a Klitschko fight in the next year or so. So I think really it's identifying that pool and then letting the chips fall where they may.
Didn't mean to cut you off. I was just sort of wondering, you got HBO always doing what they do, you guys doing what they do, and now you have PBC. I'm not sure what they're doing exactly. I don't know if they even know what they're doing exactly, except sort of just throwing the book at the wall or throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. To what extent do you believe that it's good for the larger boxing world, but maybe bad for Showtime and HBO, that they have pulled a fair amount of talent away from what could ordinarily be used by the other networks?
Well, I think it's actually a positive thing for everybody, assuming that they're doing good matchups and promoting and marketing well, which so far they have been. But what it allows the pay networks to do is to get back to what we're really good at doing, and that's premium programming. Without the other outlets, when we were essentially the only game in town, if a fighter got to a certain point and wanted to continue a career, there was almost an obligation with the network to continue to ride with him, because if you didn't give him a fight, then there's really no other opportunity to make good money anywhere else. So if you were invested with a guy, you rode with him, big fight, small fight, medium fight. And that's not really the model of premium television. So now with all these other outlets, and the opportunity to get a big audience and make decent money, then we can get back to sort of cherry picking the biggest and the best fights. That's it's a strategy we started off with, with Deontay in the long run. Now, Deontay or anyone else wants to take, maybe a mid-level fight, Amir Khan, for example. That's not necessarily a premium television fight. There are great outlets. Amir's going to expand his fan base, and then when he's ready for a high-profile matchup, then he'll be back on pay TV.
So as we wrap up here, let's sort of talk about a couple issues here. You have been in the boxing game a very long time. This is not a heavyweight fight, and so in some sense I wonder culturally what it means. But in terms of all the big boxing events you've either witnessed or been a part of, it's not just where do you rank this one, but how does the context here differ from some of the bigger Tyson or Lennox Lewis fights?
Well, I think one of the keys to the popularity and the attraction of this event, and it's not something that any of us could have planned, is the fact that we had a 5-year incubation period. That basically we came close several times to getting the fight, and it just served to build the anticipation. We have two unique personalities. We saw it in De La Hoya Mayweather, where you had two contrasts and how well that worked. I think we've got that here again, which is not always the case in every good fight. Do you have two compelling, contrasting personalities? In terms of how we sort of look at this for the rest of the week, it seems pretty clear to us that we've captured a mainstream audience, a non-boxing audience, better than virtually any event that I can remember. And whether there's that's a little bit of luck and some of the 5-year period and just a little snowball effect, or maybe it's it's combined forces of both networks working together. Whatever it is, we've achieved some sort of connectivity with an audience that, quite honestly, very few boxing or combat sports have ever achieved. I think nothing is really in the ballpark. Not De La Hoya Mayweather, not Lewis Tyson, not anything else.
And so I just wonder, looking at the media, and we'll wrap up here, but the curiosity for me is when De La Hoya fought Mayweather, there was a lot of talk about, is this the fight to save boxing? And I'm not saying that I haven't seen some headlines, the usual boxing is dead, but it's been a lot less this time. If you agree or disagree, tell me about that, but B, if you agree, why is that? Like this sort of serves proportionally as the same kind of thing, and yet there's much more attractiveness around boxing, and maybe, as some had said at the press conference, some hope for the future. What is your review of sort of what's happening here?
Well, when I see those headlines, I remember, there's an interview Dana White gave back in 2006, saying, once De La Hoya retires, it's over for boxing. That was a different era, and he had a goal of building his franchise. But you still hear that occasionally. Now it becomes more and more of a ridiculous statement when you look at the number of networks that are in boxing right now. There are obviously a lot of smart people who are working at networks and working at finance companies who are putting money into the sport. So I think this fight by itself can't save boxing, to the extent that it needs to be saved. But what it can do is maybe capture some fans, and then what's even more important than what happens May 2nd is what happens May 3rd and beyond. If those of us who work in boxing aren't able to maintain that audience, to retain them going forward from May 3rd on, then we've wasted the opportunity. But if there's some people through the build-up and through May 2nd, the night itself, are all of a sudden have their interest peaked, it's incumbent on us to sort of maintain that and bring them into the fold. That's how the sport will grow, and that begins May 3rd and beyond.
Stephen Espinoza, best of luck to you on May 2nd, May 3rd and beyond. Thank you for your time. Talk to you soon.
Anytime.